60% mental and 40% physical.
Math was never our strong suit, but breaking down Ohio State football is. Sit back and join us for Buckeye Grove Instant Access, part of the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network.
You can do it!
Brought to you by BuckeyeGrove.com. Post-game thoughts, immediate analysis, and much, much more to put the big game into perspective. Without any further delay of game, here's your host, Kevin Noon.
Kevin, goddammit.
It's a late-night edition of the BIA podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Noon. I'm here with Braden Moles and Keith Maisano here at the at Lucas Oil Stadium. Your Ohio State Buckeyes, Big Ten champions 2019, 34-21 in a game that was not without its tense moments. Buckeyes found themselves in a hole, managed to claw their way out, and, now we're sitting there talking about the playoff and everything. So, let's just jump right on board. Let's just get right to it. Initial thoughts.
Initial thoughts were that the first half, even though Buckeyes were able to gain some yards, really couldn't put any points on the board. And then defensively, the big plays that had become foreign this year that we saw a lot last year really reared their ugly head in this game. But Ohio State was able to make the adjustments they needed to overcome their first two score deficit of the season and really just took control of that second half.
Yeah, it was certainly an ugly start, and even, really getting into the second half, it still took a bit for Ohio State to really get things going. It's difficult to really say why things looked so bad at the start. Like Keaton said, it was a lot of, stuff you even saw from last year with the missed tackles and giving up those big yards. It's a little difficult to understand why that was happening because, coming into this game, I personally kind of got the sense that, they were really dialed in for this game, but that didn't really appear to be the case when they took the field. And, pass protection was a bit of a questionable aspect of the game for, I would say, probably the third week in a row now for Ohio State. Fields took, 5 sacks, and there were numerous other plays where he was forced out of the pocket. You can tell he had, I believe, 12 rushes for 1 total yard. So, obviously, a lot of sacks and then getting flushed out of the pocket, not really going anywhere. So it was a difficult week for him in terms of, kind of moving his way around the pocket. Yeah,
right off the bat, Wisconsin wins the toss. They take the ball and they march it down the field, and Ohio State in that uneasy position down 7-0. But Ohio State certainly had opportunities in the first half and just kind of really shot themselves in the foot. A lot of uncharacteristic mistakes, and then they get themselves into this bad position. A fake punt where Drew Chrisman hits Jeremy Ruckert, or Luke Farrell. I'm sorry, it was Luke Farrell on a 21-yard pass on fourth down, pretty deep on Ohio State's end. Looked like that was going to turn the tide, but that still didn't end up doing it.
Yeah, and like you said, it didn't turn the tide because it didn't lead to points because Justin Fields would fumble later in that drive in the red zone. I think just trying to do a little bit too much, fighting for extra yards on third down. But I think that play kind of set a mindset for Ohio State. Like, hey, we're going to be aggressive even though we're a little bit down right now, but we're going to still keep our foot on the gas pedal. We're still going to keep clawing at this thing until it finally breaks and we get through. And that didn't come until the second half, but you could tell Ohio State carried that aggressive mindset into the second half and we're finally able to put some points up, and it almost kind of like avalanched on Wisconsin with the 27-0 run. But yeah, just overall, I think Ohio State kind of really had the production inside the 20s, but once they got into the red zone or just really kind of inside the 30, they kind of struggled to move the ball or put up any big plays.
There were a lot of impressive individual plays, but it never seemed like they could really pull a string of them together on any one drive. You had early on Austin Mack's one-handed catch that, set Ohio State up well in Wisconsin territory, and they obviously didn't do anything with that. And then obviously you had the fake punt that led to the Fields fumble. So, like Kevin said, just a lot of self-inflicted mistakes that really kept them off the board early. When you look at this, Wisconsin clearly outplayed Ohio State in the first half. But if Ohio State could have avoided those mistakes, I think it would have been a very different game. And going into the second half, it would have been a very different perception kind of for how things were going. So, going into the second half, it was a lot, that was easily the worst game Ohio State had played in the first half all season with all the mistakes they were making. So it was really interesting seeing kind of how they responded to that in the second half.
Jonathan Taylor for Wisconsin finally had his first big game against the Buckeyes. 20 carries, $148, a touchdown. Honestly, if you watch the game, though, it really felt like that number probably should have been about double, just because every time you look, 23 was getting into the second level, breaking tackles, taking it into the third level. a lot of long runs. I mean, it just, was very different than what we saw in the end of October.
Yeah, and just really even going further back than October, I think it'd become kind of a precedent for Ohio State almost to shut down these premier backs with like Saquon Barkley, you got Jonathan Taylor, and before him, Melvin Gordon. I mean, it just become habit for Ohio State to like shut these guys down, but there's a reason these guys are good backs. I mean, they're not putting up these numbers against no names. They do it against other Big Ten opponents, and they just really couldn't translate to Ohio State, and this was a game that Jonathan Taylor got loose. I think Wisconsin had a good plan for him coming in this game. I mean, they had been thinking about this loss for a while, and there's two teams that come into these games game planning, and Wisconsin had a great game plan in the first half, and Ohio State was able to adjust in the second half and shut him down, only give up 22 rushing yards to him in the second half.
I mean, Taylor, this is kind of his first real good game against Ohio State, but in general, this is kind of the first time Ohio State's really gotten gashed on the ground by any individual rusher this year. So it's kind of a testament to how Wisconsin was able to game plan, but I also think on Ohio State's side, I mean, Day has kind of preached about complacency all year and wanting to avoid that, but I think that bug may have bit them a little bit because, I mean, you look at kind of this big stretch of games they had. They had the Penn State game, the Michigan game, and now this. I mean, those were all very emotional games, kind of a rivalry aspect to all of them, especially so in the Michigan game. So this may just kind of be the culmination of that really tough stretch for Ohio State. And then obviously they're thinking, it's something that they don't want to talk about that they probably do think about. But, after 12 hours after the game's over, they're going to be watching ESPN to figure out where they'll be in the college football playoffs, assuming they did win that game, which they did. So they may have gotten caught looking ahead for the first time this season.
One more thing to wrap off the first half, and then we'll get into the second half, which is a little bit more positive. The Buckeyes finally break through late in the second quarter with 42 seconds left, a J.K. Dobbins 2-yard touchdown run. Ohio State kicks the ball off. It looks like, okay, they're going to escape everything. Then Taylor goes for another long run, 45 yards. Wisconsin ends up putting up a touchdown, 4-play drive, 75 yards, 32 seconds at the 10-second mark of the half. I mean, at that point, I think a lot of Buckeye faithful was probably starting to get a little nervous at that point because it really looked like Ohio State had turned the tide, down 14-7. They were going to start the second half with the ball. That was what the plan was going to be, and then, just mistakes reared their ugly head again.
Yeah, and it really felt like for the first time Ohio State kind of grasped that momentum back, and then you kind of saw the path to getting back in this game, like you said, getting the ball back, having a chance to tie it right at the beginning of the half, and really all they had to do was just make one stop, make one tackle. But Jonathan Taylor's a special player. He's able to bust it for 45 yards, and then they were able to punch it in after a good catch from Cephas. But it was just, you could just tell that in that first half, almost like everything that could go wrong for Ohio State did, and they only found themselves down 14, and to their credit, they were able to fight back, and they could easily roll over. You are playing for a Big Ten championship game, but the ultimate goal is to win the national championship, and they had already secured that with the way that earlier games had resulted, so there was really no way they could fall out of the playoff, but they were able to rally the troops and come back in the second half.
I think with, it was definitely a positive kind of development for them scoring late in the half, but, with the Taylor's, however, 40-something yard long run late in the second half, at that point, it kind of just felt like Ohio State was trying to escape to the second half, where, they get to the locker room, especially with a long halftime show for the Big Ten championship, I think 25-something minutes, they would have plenty of time to make adjustments. I think Jeff Hafley's talked all season about how there's really no such thing as halftime adjustments. You're constantly making adjustments, but it was clear from the kickoff that Wisconsin was kind of punching Ohio State in the face, and, as they say, you have a plan until you get punched in the face, and Ohio State was clearly taking a beating early on. So I think just getting back to the locker room at halftime was kind of the biggest thing for Ohio State, and just trying to kind of stop the bleeding along the way there.
We're going to make our halftime adjustments here. We're going to hear from our sponsors, and we'll come back and talk about the second half. Egg Water Conditioning has been treating well in city water in Central Ohio with American-made water filtration products for over 60 years. Have a water quality problem? The water treatment experts at Hague know how to solve it. Not sure if your water softener is working? They will test, inspect, and sanitize any brand of water softener for only $20. Schedule a system checkup or water test today by calling 614-836-2195 or visit them online at HagueH2O.com. That's HAGUE H2O.com. Welcome back to the BIA podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Noon, of course, joined with Braden Moles and Keaton Maisano here, talking about a 34-21 Ohio State win that secured the Big Ten championship for the Buckeyes 3 in a row. All right, Ohio State, they're down 21-7 at the half. People are nervous. We know that there are going to be adjustments made. Ohio State comes out, immediately puts up a touchdown strike. Jeremy Ruckert on a 16-yard pass from Justin Fields. Maybe not the prettiest drive that we've seen all year, but points are points and still effective nonetheless.
Yeah, and I mean, it looked like it was going to be a 3-and-out to start the drive. I mean, Fields had the rollout to his left, and then luckily Chris Olave was able to ad-lib a route, and Fields kind of just put the ball up there and let him make a play on it to get that first down. And then the throw to Ruckert was not the best throw from Fields, but Ruckert was able to make one of the best catches of the night, other than like Austin Mack's one-handed catch, able to snag it in the end zone. And then that really just kind of set the tone for the half. And then, I mean, Ohio State was able to really just ride that momentum the rest of the way. And the answering right out of the half was huge, because giving the ball back to Wisconsin, still down 2 possessions, kind of would give them the momentum back. And Ohio State was really just able to answer the bell coming out of the half.
It was certainly, I think, a drive that really helped calm down Ohio State. It was not one that they're probably going to look back on in film sessions and be proud of. 'Cause, I mean, it was obviously a great drive for them, having finished with a touchdown, but, it required a big 3rd-down conversion with Fields throwing across his body to Olave, who had to adjust in the middle of the field for the ball, and then obviously the overthrown ball that Ruckert was somehow able to pull in, kind of extending his whole body for it. So I think, it's not something they're going to look back on and really take anything away from, but it was really a drive to help calm them down, because I think Fields looked significantly better after that point. So it really similar to in the Michigan game, I believe it was 2nd down, the 57-yard bomb to Chris Olave, that really helped settle Ohio State's offense. And I think something similar happened against Wisconsin.
Then Ohio State forces a quick turnaround with Wisconsin. Wisconsin ends up having problems on the snap with the punt. Buckeyes get a short field, have to settle for a 27-yard field goal because they really couldn't move the ball at that point. But at that point, they cut it to 4. It's starting to feel like momentum is turning Ohio State's way, yet they just aren't able to break through quite yet.
Yeah, and I mean, you said special teams there, and really the first half with the fake punt, that was big for Ohio State to get the first down, and then the muff on the by the punter for Wisconsin really set Ohio State up to make the game a 4-point game. And then when Wisconsin got the ball back, they drove down the field, set themselves up for a field goal, and missed that. So there was just big special teams plays, all went Ohio State's way, and that's why Urban Meyer and now Ryan Day really put such an emphasis on that special teams, because in those close games it can cost you games, and I think it really cost Wisconsin when the momentum was kind of hanging in the balance there.
I mean, it really felt like a lot of what made Ohio State successful in the second half was avoiding those kind of costly mistakes that they were inflicting in the first half, and then just kind of turning those opportunities on their head that they were missing in the first half. Fields finally finding his receivers, and obviously being able to convert on special teams and help out there. So I think it was just a big shift in the second half, really, from, obviously we heard post-game that C.J. Saunders, Jonathan Cooper, Chase Young, J.K. Dobbins all had something to say to the team, kind of getting them hyped up. I believe C.J. Saunders saying, if you don't want to go out there and win this game, don't go out there, stay in the locker room. So, I mean, it was big adjustments at halftime that helped them kind of stop those mistakes and really start to take over the game.
And then the Buckeyes did take over the game. A pair of touchdown passes to K.J. Hill from Justin Fields. I know when I had my vote for the MVP of the game, the MVP was Justin Fields. I voted for K.J. Hill. I thought he had a tremendous game for the Buckeyes. He is now the all-time leading receptions receiver for Ohio State. 7 receptions for 83 yards, a pair of touchdowns, and they really start to wrestle away momentum and obviously the lead at that point.
Yeah, and really, the K.J. Hill, I agree with you, really had a tremendous game. And then Justin Fields, the turnaround from the first half to the second half, I mean, Justin Fields spent more time on the ground in that first half just being sacked. I mean, he'd been sacked 5 times the last time Wisconsin came and played Ohio State, and then 5 again today. But really turned around the second half. I mean, he was 50% for only 127 in the first half, but then 19 for 31 to finish the game for 299, had all 3 of his touchdowns in the second half. Really was helped out by good plays from K.J. Hill and then Jeremy Ruckert. But, yeah, I mean, there was just really a huge contrast, like night and day, between the first half and the second half from that offense.
And moving to the kind of the other side of the ball, I think a big part of why Ohio State was so successful, I mean, obviously besides holding Wisconsin to 0 points in the second half, it really helped the offense kind of settle down, not worrying that they were able to. The defense was really able to stop Jonathan Taylor in the second half. He wasn't breaking off for he wasn't falling forward for 3 or 4 yards like he was in the first half. So the offense being able to go out on the field, not concerned about what the defense is going to have to do to kind of pick up slack, I think that really helped them to kind of settle down.
I promise Lucas Oil Stadium is not falling apart. They're breaking things down now that the Big Ten championship is over. We're gonna speed this up a little bit. We're gonna probably be podcasting at about 12 hours from the time that we're recording this when Ohio State knows its position in the college football playoff. I'm gonna ask just a real simple question: 1, 2, 3, or 4. Where should they be? Where should they be, and where will they be?
I think that Ohio State has been the best team, most well-rounded team in the country this entire year. I think the committee recognizes that, and I think the gap was so big that they will stay at number 1.
I think that I agree with Keaton. I think they have clearly been the best team this season. I think they deserve to be at number 1. However, I think the biggest thing the committee has preached about the difference between Ohio State and LSU is that Ohio State has been consistent on both sides of the ball on offense and defense. And I think, today, Saturday, whenever you're listening to this, I guess, this was kind of the first set of games this season where LSU looked better than Ohio State against a comparable opponent, a top 10 opponent. I mean, LSU's defense was really able to clamp down against Georgia. Not that Georgia's some offensive juggernaut or anything, but they were really able to clamp down against them. And then the offense obviously had a really successful game against Georgia's defense. So I do think the committee is going to put LSU at 1 just because they were finally able to show that kind of consistency on both sides of the ball.
I think Ohio State should be number 1. I'm not sure if they will be. They were number 1 for the last couple of weeks. There's been all this talk about game control. Yes, LSU was better against UGA this week. Are we looking at a 1-game season at that point? How large was the margin going into it? Is that enough to overtake them? I wouldn't be surprised to see them at number 2, potentially going out to play Clemson in the Fiesta Bowl. Not exactly the greatest prize in the world, as the way that Clemson has been playing, but it would not surprise me if Ohio State was still number 1, drawing Oklahoma at that point. But as I said, we'll be talking to you in 12 hours or so. So we're going to just wrap this up with one round of final thoughts, and then we're going to get on our way before they break down the tables that we're using right now.
Yeah, my last final thought for this was just the Ohio State had shown everything throughout this year: the ability to dominate, the ability to be great on offense, the ability to suffocate people with their defense, and they finally showed the ability to really respond to real adversity today. And they were pushed. Their backs were up against the wall against the best team that they've played all year in Wisconsin. I mean, Wisconsin, I think, has been undervalued at how good they are. They have a great defense, great running back, really good receivers. And I think Ohio State was able to respond, really enforce their will in the second half and win this game.
I mean, it was obviously scary for Ohio State fans to see the Buckeyes down 14-0 and then 21-7 going into the second half. But overall, I really think this will be a positive for Ohio State. I mean, we've talked kind of all season about, where they have and haven't faced adversity, whether it was against, Michigan State or Wisconsin or Penn State, whatever it may be. I mean, this is really the first, down 14 points. That's nothing to sneeze. I mean, that's not a comeback that most teams complete. So, I mean, this was a real case of adversity that Ohio State was able to overcome. So I think in the long term, while obviously it wasn't fun to watch at the time, I really think this is going to benefit Ohio State when they start to get into the deeper stages of the season.
Yeah, exactly. I think that there's going to be a lot they're going to be able to learn here. Hopefully the lesson doesn't cost them too much in terms of a bad first-round matchup. But, everybody talking about, why, nobody wants to face Clemson. Well, I still don't think anybody really wants to face Ohio State when things are going right. And the one thing I'll say is Clemson or LSU or Oklahoma, they've not faced Ohio State this year. They don't have 60 minutes of tape that they can look at and say, well, we did this and this didn't work, and we did this and this worked a little bit and whatnot. I mean, they're going to be preparing for them cold like any other team would. And I think that bodes well for the Buckeyes. But, we have plenty of time to talk about that. I want to thank everybody for staying up late with us on the BIA podcast. I am your host, Kevin Noon. Thank you, Braden. Thank you, Keaton. And we will talk to you soon.
Be sure to stay up to date with Buckeye Grove Instant Access when the news breaks or after the big game. Exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher as part of the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network. Hit that subscribe button so you can stay in the know and never miss a single episode.